Good people, I wanted to switch it up. We've got just a few more weeks of the semester, and so I want you to channel this. Channel being on a beach, watching a show about a beach. I don't know, but I know we're almost there. And so let's just ease in, okay? And finish this semester strong. This is the second to last item that we will be embarking on this semester. It has been such a pleasure having you. If you are on campus or have a class in person, I would just love to meet you and see you. But if not, hey, all right. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go from there as we begin our corporate social responsibility module. Here we go. All right, good people. So today we are going to embark in the corporate social responsibility model. We've had a lot of fun looking at different moments, different events, right, in sports and society and culture. And now for the last piece of this class, as we examine inequalities in sports and human activity and culture, I'm going to give you one more piece of the puzzle, and that is the corporate social responsibility. We're going to add on how we understand how sports organizations, how do they balance profit, ethics, and social impact through a critical equity lens. So what is CSR? Has anyone heard of corporate social responsibility? CSR, it functions as both a philosophy and a framework for accountability, essentially, right? It reveals whether organizations genuinely prioritize social responsibility, or do they merely perform this sort of concern, right? Are they property performers, okay, to protect their reputation? And so it's a framework that, like I said, holds organizations accountable beyond this profit margin, right? It asks questions. How can you operate ethically, equitably, and sustainably while contributing to the well-being of society? Is that possible? Another way that folks have talked about it is there such thing as an ethical billionaire? In the sports industry, CSR takes on a lot of unique dimensions, and it's merely, not about just winning championships or selling merchandise. It's about the integrity, about how those victories are achieved, and, well, who benefits from commercial success, okay? So that's how we're going to set the stage. So we're going to start with 1991, okay? I don't think many of y'all were alive. Anyway, and so we are going to look at the OG, the four dimensions of CSI. So Carroll had this pyramid framework in 1991. This is the seminal OG foundational framework that really looks at organizations regardless of, whether if it's sport or not. It came more about business, philanthropy, etc. And so there were four dimensions of corporate social responsibility that Carroll coined in 1991. The first one is philanthropic responsibility, right? How are you contributing to society through charity, through goodwill initiatives, right? Philanthropic, boom. The next one is ethical. How are you as an institution, as an organization, doing what's right beyond this sort of legal compliance, right? The third dimension is legal responsibility. How are organizations obeying the laws and regulations? And even how are you governing the team, the organization, etc.? How is that operation taking place? And the last one is the economic responsibility. Every organization, every business, every company, they need to make money in order to survive. And so how are these particular organizations generating revenue and also sustaining viable operations? You got to, make money to get money, give money to make money, all of that, right? So that is the foundation from Carroll 1991. That article is uploaded already in your module just to get that foundation on the baseline of what Carroll created many, many decades ago. So why the OG, the foundational CSR? Why is it complicated, particularly when it comes to sports? Well, sports organizations usually enthusiastically embrace corporate social responsibility, but often for these problematic reasons. What are you talking about, Dr. G? Well, there's a gap, right? There's a gap between the stated values, going on the website, seeing what the mission and the vision is, and the actual practices. And that is how we can really see if corporate social responsibility model is really being operationalized, right? Are they walking the talk, or are they just talking the talk? You understand? And so when we look at CSI, we were watching that this weekend. When we look at corporate social responsibility and looking at it in sports, it also performs virtue. Okay, a lot of performative things taking place, but maintaining existing power structures. Now, remember, this course, really one of the main pillars, regardless of what theory or framework, is about power. We're examining power. And so through that sports crit lens, that's always the lens, go ahead and put those lenses on right now. As we look at corporate social responsibility and expand the framework, we can distinguish genuine accountability, other than strategic reputation management. Why is this tough? Well, we look at it, the philanthropy play, look at our foundation. Look at what we're doing for the people, right? But the real question is, does the foundation address the root cause of inequality or inequity, right? Or is it merely just a distract from some sort of institutional failure? The next reason why it's complicated is the marketing play. Hey, we care about diversity. See, go ahead and go on our homepage. Go ahead and click on the tab of our MBA Cares model, right? But what is really happening? How many people of color, people of minoritized, different communities? How many folks are part of the LGBTQIA community? How many folks are of diverse ages and backgrounds that actually occupy these leadership positions, right, with decision-making authority? Okay, are they just copying and pasting? Someone of color, someone that's a part of the queer community, someone that may not fall in the traditional age range. Like, what's really happening? Another reason why, the traditional corporate social responsibility model is complicated because there's something called greenwashing. Have you heard of it? Go ahead and get your iPads and doodads and knickknacks, paddywhacks. The term greenwashing, my hope is that when you're done with this class, when you're done with me, you won't be able to see sports the same. And in addition to that, I want you to have this new language embedded in you, and greenwashing is one of them, right? Greenwashing play. So what happens is showing the sustainability, greenwashing, sport washing. So green is saying, hey, we're carbon neutral, y'all. The real question is, are workers exploited? We think about FIFA World Cup. I want to say it's 2022. It was in Qatar, and there was a great deal of resistance because of the location, because of the ways in which the workers that were helping to build and create and tweak the stadium, their passports were being taken away. They weren't working, they weren't being paid livable wages. They were working in the hot, and when I mean hot sun, didn't have any sort of like health insurance. And so they want to say we're tweaking this beautiful stadium, but that's greenwashing, showing that sustainability. But how are you treating the workers? Sports washing in general is sports organizations, teams, companies, they show, hey guys, we're doing some good things for the people, right? It's almost like a distraction. Let's show all the wonderful things that this organization, this team, this player is doing, right? Let's keep the feel good energy, but not really pulling back and looking at the organization as a whole in ways that it could get better. And the last one that, the traditional corporate social responsibility model is really difficult and complicated is because it's the empowerment. Who do you empower? Hey, we empower women. We support the LGBTQIA community. We love our veterans, okay? But the real question is, who controls the paychecks, the contracts, the media coverage, and the narrative ownership? Do these folks that are supported, do they have decision-making power? And are they being paid an adequate wage? Makes sense? So these are the 4 ways in which, just looking at corporate social responsibility, the OG module that Carol did, it can be very tough, particularly sports and nowadays. So, the modern application of CSR, many scholars have extended this particular model to incorporate a few more components. One of them is the environmental sustainability, social equity and inclusion, governance and transparency, labor and athlete rights, and then community impact. So for those that are going to be registering for any more of my classes, particularly in the fall, all of my classes will be examining the LA 28 Olympics, but depending on the course, they will be different avenues and lens that we will approach to really build some wonderful research and just this great archive, right? And so the expanded CSR framework really helps broaden looking at organizations, looking at mega sporting events, etc., right? Environmental, social equity and inclusion, governance and transparency, labor and athlete rights, and what is the community impact? All right, let's move on. So, the slide that we will be examining, that we will be looking and pulling out is the foundational CSR responsibilities, but also as you look at the expanded framework, that is how you students are going to really sharpen that sports crit lens. So let's give an example of what that looks like. Last semester, in my 4430 class, the ongoing case study was name, image, and likeness, NIL, right? And we just looked at it and unpacked it with all the lens of sports crit, and it was a good time, okay? And so students, I wanted to give an example of something that they looked at as it pertained to NIL. And so, on this table, the OG layer, economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibility. These are the definitions, right? But the sport example is professional teams, ticket sales, sponsorship, and media rights deals, right? That's the economic responsibility. Those are things that this team or organization falls under the economic ways that the organization works. The sports crit question, as we are expanding and ask, who benefits most from the profits? The institution, the athletes, or the company? Now we're looking at in previous conversations, the WNBA, who benefited from the way that the collective bargaining agreement was beforehand, right? And who benefits now? It seems like there's a little bit more shared governance. So legal responsibility, following NCAA compliance, Title IX standards, NIL laws, right? That's the ways legally that particular organizations, as we're looking at name, image, and likeness, falls under that legal responsibility. Then the question that we ask with our sports crit lens is, are the laws themselves just, or do they preserve existing inequities? Once again, as we look at it from the WNBA standpoint, right, progress is made when power gets paid, right? So how much of the existing structure of the WNBA is still in the mix? Record-breaking attendance, ticket sales, I was at the Final Four, sold out. But the question is, are they preserving existing inequities? The third one with the OG, the CSR, is ethical, right? Doing what's right beyond legal compliance. So ensuring fair treatment, honest recruitment, mental health support, just to name a few. And so the sports crit question we have is, whose ethics define what's right in this context? And once again, as we look at power, who's the decision making of who and what is right? We're on the right side of history. And lastly, when we look at philanthropy, right? Contributing to society for charity and goodwill, community clinics, athlete scholarships, sustainability initiatives, right? These are examples in sports that companies and organizations lean into when it comes to philanthropy. But the question is this real systemic change or just some sort of reputation management? Listen, as Marshawn Lynch said, I'm just here so I don't get fined. So how much are these sports organizations really creating systemic change for reputation management? So really quickly, the corporate social responsibility, it's not just a checklist, it's a mirror. The beautiful thing about CSR, expanding it, looking at it from your sports crit lens, good people, is that social media is alive and well. And so there's a lot of fact checkers, there's a lot of independent FBI agents that can say, hey, you said you support X, Y, and Z. However, the receipts show otherwise. And so the time to look at these organizations, these leagues, look at collective bargaining agreements, it's a mirror of who is deemed as worthy and who should receive the receipts, the support, as well as the money, okay? Corporate social responsibility. So why are we talking about this today in this particular module? We're going to be adding corporate social responsibility to the final podcast. Stay tuned for a video. I'm going to break it all down of exactly what I'm looking for, whether if you're a solo podcaster or you're doing a group podcast episode. And we'll break that down of how you can incorporate the CSR in your final podcast episode. So one thing I want you to do is to go back to your proposal, right? And look at ways in which corporate social responsibility can be analyzed, right? And for the final podcast, which I said I will do a video, the CSR, you only have to choose two out of the expanded CSR framework. Only have to do at least two as you're talking about your event, the athlete, the topic, the issue, etc. All right. So corporate social responsibility. I wanted to let you know as a closing thought to conclude this whole really audit as you're building your podcast and really utilizing your Sports Grit lens effectively. Address these critical questions. This is not an exit ticket. This is not due. But at the end of your podcast episode, you have to do a recommendation. So if it's a topic, if an issue, if it's an event, how does this recommendation move the organization, the topic, the issue, closer to liberation, closer to no oppression, closer to all parties included are liberated, are free, have equitable outcomes rather than being just simply a representation. Okay, good people. I'm very, very happy to be bringing you another piece of our Sports Grit lens, corporate social responsibility. And remember, the four from the original is economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic. Those are the four OGs. But remember, as we expand it, we're going to be looking at environmental sustainability, social equity and inclusion, governance and transparency, labor rights and athlete rights, and then the community impact. So stay tuned. I'll have another breakdown of exactly what that looks like for your final podcast episode. And don't forget, the spectatorship audit is due this Friday, April 17th. So that's where there's not too much extra things that I want y'all to work on this week. Familiarize yourself with the corporate social responsibility model, the expanded version, and how you can incorporate that in your podcast. All right, good people. It's been swell, and I look forward to talking with you soon.